All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session titled Global Investors See Value in Sharpening Focus on Southeast Asia. My name is Ken Koyanagi, senior staff writer at Nikkei, Japanese newspaper organization. And our distinguished panelists are Akshay Bhushan from India, a partner at Lightspeed, and JP Lee, managing partner at SoftBank Ventures Asia. He is based in Seoul, Korea. So we're going to talk about a variety of things regarding how geographical focus is shifting in this dynamic world today, and how investors today, rather than yesterday, are seeing value in Southeast Asia startup investments in particular. Okay, let's start. So if we talk about this kind of things, we cannot avoid talking about China. Actually, that's I think everybody is interested in hearing from you guys. So I'd like to start with this topic, kickstart with this topic. So everybody's knowing that China is shifting rapidly towards kind of socialism renaissance or revival, led by President Xi Jinping, and particularly for the past few months, we are seeing a lot of crackdowns on tech companies, giant tech companies like Alibaba and Alipay, even ByteDance or Tencent, etc., etc. And also we are seeing crackdowns on some gaming services and also online education, etc. So, and that on the background, we are hearing a lot about Communist Party's agenda of preventing disorderly expansion of capital, and also they are rapidly promoting common prosperity, which means they are not allowing some people getting far richer than all the most majority of people in China. And then they're now saying they have to protect the physical and mental health of minors. And they are saying online games are opium, psychological opium for young kids. And they are cracking down on gaming, and they're putting limits on gaming time. And also they're now putting caps on spending time with online videos. So I think this is a dramatic change of basic condition of startup investments in China. And I want to ask each of you, how is internal discussion going within your investment management organization? I think I would start with JP, because SoftBank as a whole group has a lot of exposure to Chinese startups, of course, and particularly actually Bhushan has been really vocal in promoting the future possibility, huge possibility of Chinese startup companies, and he has been leading investments in very early stage of Alibaba, for example. So what are you talking? I mean, what are you discussing about the current status of China as an investment destination?
So, because I represent the early stage venture arm of SoftBank Group, which is called SoftBank Ventures Asia, it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of our group. However, within SoftBank Ventures Asia, we have been actively investing in, China, Southeast Asia, Korea, and we've been also doing some deals in Japan, where our headquarters is based. I think it's time of uncertainty. So we are carefully, keeping our eyes on the changes and, trying to be more selective when it comes to making investment decisions. But we do still continue. You know, we've been making investments in China, and sector-wise, industry-wise, we're trying to be more selective. So that's what I could say about China. But you know, if you ask us, are we then spending or will be spending more time in Southeast Asia? The answer would be yes. And you know, I would say, regardless of what's happening in China, we believe Southeast Asia startup ecosystem is showing signs of becoming the next big economy for venture capital. You know, for example, C Group share price is more than 20x since IPO. This has peaked global internet, you know, global interest in Southeast Asia. The ongoing low interest rate environment and recent regulatory, you know, changes in China, I do believe has also helped to drive investors towards Southeast Asia for growth opportunities. And furthermore, COVID has accelerated digitization adoption in Southeast Asia. For example, internet users in the region's top 6 economies increased by about 40 million in 2020, I believe, with now close to 70% of the 650 million Southeast Asia population is online.
Well, that's actually amazing. Actually, well, that's higher than bank account penetration.
It is.
I see. You talked about sector-wise and industry-wide selectiveness, and why? What are you? I mean, what about this investment stages? Because you know, this common prosperity agenda is kind of focusing on unicorns and unicorn founders, actually, because they're getting super rich before going public, and so it gives me an impression that investments in unicorn at very late stage involves higher risk than early stage investments. Do you see any kind of mindset changes in those regards?
Well, I mean, because my job is to look into early stage companies. You know, we actually have less, I would say, opinions regarding what's going to happen to unicorns. However, you know, if you look at Nasdaq yesterday, you know, there was a crash, and I think it's a global, you know, from a macro global perspective, we're a bit worried about a possible adjustment. If there's a real adjustment, you know, happening in the public market, I think that will, you know, sooner or later, you know, make impact on the private market as well. You know, if you ask me, it's not just China, and since we're on a Southeast Asia topic, you know, the overall valuation has gone up, you know, so high in the past 2 years. You know, fund round sizes are seriously increasing, becoming bigger. You know, average Series A deal size is now minimum. I'm seeing them at like 24 million in Q2 of 2021, which is 2x YOY increase, while average Series B round is now close to 40-50 million, and that's something that I would correlate to the future macro impact.
That's a very interesting number. You said average Series A valuation is like 24 million?
That's what I have seen in Q2 21.
And Series B is like 40 to 50.
That's right.
Well, that's really impressive. Actually, well, if you're covering Japan, maybe it's higher than Japanese average Series A valuation. What do you think?
It is, but you know, we recently invested in a very good startup in Japan, and the fast rising ones are also, I think, within a similar range, and the important thing here is investors are, pushing emerging startups to start expanding, pan-regional to capture first mover advantages before local players gain too much local competitive share. So, it's the startups, whether it's starting in Singapore, in Seoul, or Tokyo, they're now targeting all Pan Asia, right? We, for example, invested in a company called Soda. It's actually in Tokyo. It's a sneaker reseller platform that we've been back in Series A. They merged with Monokabu, which is the second largest, and they're now opening up an office in Singapore. And it was not usual thing to see, for example, Seoul company to go to Southeast Asia, or Japanese-born startup to go to Korea, Southeast Asia, or vice versa. But that Pan-Asia play is getting pretty common, and that's what also investors are encouraging them to do so. So that's, I would say, one of the interesting movements that I've been witnessing in the past year or two.
That's really, really interesting, actually. All right, and so let's move on to Akshay. So you're mainly covering Indian startups, or you both cover Southeast Asia, India?
India and Southeast Asia, yeah.
Okay. Are you feeling the impact of recent dramatic changes in Chinese economic policy environments?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. We've actually as Lightspeed, we actually have been investing in. We have a team in China as well, right? Besides a team which invests across India and Southeast Asia. So it's been actually interesting to see the dynamic play out between the three regions, right? I'd say from a China perspective, it's I'd say broadly the strategy is still to kind of wait and watch a little bit in terms of how things settle, and so take a slightly more cautious approach at this point. However, one interesting thing which we are seeing is I think increasing Chinese capital interest by Chinese capital in Southeast Asia, for example. And I think there are obviously like two trends there. I think one is obviously Ken, what you mentioned, right? What's happening in China, but I'd say the second is till a couple of years ago, we'd seen a lot of Chinese activity in markets like India as well. And then due to geopolitical reasons, a lot of that capital is, India as a destination for capital from China. Obviously, that has slowed significantly, right? So I think net, it's definitely a good. I'd say broadly, Southeast Asia as a region is one which will benefit from a lot of these. I guess geopolitical events broadly, and I think the other thing to just keep in mind is Southeast Asia itself. I think is really coming into prime time now. I think JP mentioned C Group. I mean that's one example of massive value creation, right? From the region. All right, I think it's like close to 140-150 billion dollar market cap company. And then besides that, scale platforms like Grab, Traveloka, Gojek, and so on emerging, and I think that has like knock-on effects in just so many ways, right? I think one is founder talent which has seen scale, right, just coming out to start new companies, downstream capital, not just from Southeast Asia but globally, which has seen some success in the region, right? So I think it's just like a perfect storm in terms of for the ecosystem overall. So we're quite excited about what we're seeing in Southeast Asia. And interesting enough, did a highest number of deals in Southeast Asia this year as well. So
yeah, I mean, if I may add, I mean, we're also seeing the Southeast Asia market gaining, more global interest recently, due to just like what Akshay mentioned, the exit buzz around. For example, Bukalapa's successful IPO, the domestic IPO, which was upside from, I believe, 300 million to 1.5 billion, as well as the upcoming IPOs are spec of unicorns such as Grab, Property grew, and Carvideo, Devo, you name it, right? Risk around exits, which in the past have concerned global investors like us, have now been somewhat mitigated, I would say. And an interesting statistics in the first 9 months of just this year, 2021, there were, please correct me if I'm wrong, I counted, there were about 16 unicorns just in Southeast Asia, of which we expect a few more liquidity exit events through IPO or SPAC. And according to, thanks to Deal Street Asia, Southeast Asia startups announced new funding of at least $5.7 billion in Q2, which is more than double the capital raised in Q2 of 2020. So SoftBank Ventures Asia, we continue to believe there'll be more capital invested into Southeast Asia from regional as well as global VCs like us, or actually as Lightspeed.
Okay. Actually, that actually prompts the next question I prepared, which is, so how are Southeast Asian startups businesses making sense to global investors? Because, well, there are 6 major countries in Southeast Asia, and combined together, it's like 600 million population, right? Which is less than half of India or China. So even if those Southeast Asian companies are going pan-regional, which means pan-Southeast Asia, it still addresses a very relatively smaller market compared to Chinese and Indian startups. But as probably JP talked about earlier, so the main road ahead for Southeast Asian companies are pan-Asian rather than pan-Southeast Asia. Is that something going on? What do you think, JP?
So I'll put it this way. I think investors have always seen the massive potential for Southeast Asia addressable market, given its own population and high interest penetration. But global investors have historically had concerns around these startups' ability to monetize. However, with the rising number of unicorns and exits that I just mentioned, in the past few years, we're seeing investors, including ourselves, concern around this decline. And historically, there has been an emphasis of user growth and monetize later. However, we have seen that Southeast Asia startups can balance healthy growth with the ability to retain and monetize users. And furthermore, we're also seeing a new and growing breed of seasoned founders. There are a lot of returners from Silicon Valley or serial entrepreneurs, many who are well-trained and experienced about growth, strategy, operations at the big tech unicorns, and are coming out to their own startups. And this has increased the appetite for investments into founders in the region. I think that's one of the key points that I wanted to point out today.
Okay. And what do you think, Akshay? I'm sorry. So Southeast Asian companies their business models and strategies are making more sense than a couple of years ago?
Yeah, what I'd say is, if you look at a lot of the investors in Southeast Asia, right, especially the global ones, such as JP or myself, I think we've obviously been operating in multiple, other markets or slightly more mature startup markets, right, in the past. And I think one interesting observation has been, if you look at like certain emerging markets like India or Indonesia or Vietnam, a lot of these economies are very, very similarly structured to to economies like India or even China about maybe like 10 years ago, right, 10, 15 years ago. And so what we find is that a lot of we see commonalities in terms of the kinds of business models which work in one market, have the ability to work with obviously relevant localization in sort of analogous markets in Southeast Asia. So, for example, we're big believers as Lightspeed in the B2B digitization and SMB digitization space in globally. But that was sort of a theme which we started investing in, what we saw in India, right? Which is it's got 100 million plus SMBs, and predominantly a self-employment economy. And so we have companies like Udaan one of the largest B2B procurement platforms, and so on. And so similarly, when we started spending time in Indonesia, very similar market, 80 million SMBs, again, predominantly self-employment economy. And so, we made similar investments in the region, and which have scaled quite nicely. I'd say just to add one nuance on the monetization piece, and I think to JP's point, given that a lot of the economies in Southeast Asia are generally, let's say, higher GDP per capita than, let's say, a market like India. I think what's been interesting is from a monetization perspective, I've seen uptake and monetization of digital services happen a little bit faster. And I think it's because the economies are slightly more advanced in terms of some of these economic indicators, though maybe the startup ecosystem is maybe a cycle behind, right? So I'd say those are broadly what we've seen so far in terms of business models and so on.
Okay. And if I may add to Akshay's point, I mean, we also have seen significant potential in B2B business in Southeast Asia. When I say this, people are surprised. B2C has historically been the focal point for startups, but we're starting to see a growing number of B2B startups and interesting investment opportunities. And SoftBank Ventures Asia has recently, for example, invested into a digital infrastructure company called OI. That is focused on, B2B, actually, as you know, online and offline money movement as well. As Super, which is a community group-based social commerce that sells to both consumer as well as Warungs, which is mom and pop shops. And we believe that businesses increasingly need to digitize in Southeast Asia. And I believe now is the time to look closely at the B2B space. And it would also be noteworthy to point out that our family SoftBank Vision Fund had invested significant capital into Trax and out both B2B businesses out of Singapore. And I think to add to your point, Ken, I think pan-regional expansion is a lot more feasible now than before, given the significant capital available at startups' disposal, as I mentioned earlier. So therefore, giving startups ample capital to expand abroad at earlier stages, rather than waiting till later stages, is important. And we're also pushing nudging these startups to as I said earlier, to go pan-regional, right? And this is particularly important in a space like, for example, I would say fintech or regulated industry, where it is crucial to secure upfront licenses, which create competitive moats. And if you have a strong expansion playbook with ample capital at hand, why wait it out to expand regionally so long, as there is conviction around product market fit, so long as management believes they have sufficient bandwidth to handle multiple markets.
Interesting. And I wonder, so those B2B startups start their business in their home country, obviously. And then if you look around outside your country, then you see similar business model startups in different markets, right? I mean, like, truck capacity matching, or, e-commerce infrastructure, logistics companies, etc. And are you seeing any opportunities for pan-regional consolidations among those B2B startups? And probably venture capitalists would help, coordinating those, connecting those companies. What do you think?
So I actually have a very interesting example that came out of Southeast Asia. It's a company called iUno. It's a B2B content localization technology company. Basically, they offer subtitles and dubbing services to different OTTs like Netflix or Amazon or even TV networks. They started off in Singapore. They're still their chairman and the CEO is sitting in Singapore. They expanded to Indonesia, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and became a #1 Pan-Asia player. And you know what happened? They adopted AI technology after receiving their first institutional capital from SoftBank Ventures Asia. And we strongly encourage them to use their translation and translated data to train an AI model to start reducing cost, right? So instead of having human translate, I think now more than 30-40% of their translation process is done by AI. So this is why, as a VC, we provided capital and strategy. And what ended up happening was they became so profitable, and they were able to digest all the massive, demands coming from these global OTTs. They were able to acquire merge the number one content localization company in Europe called BTI 2 years ago. And just this year, they acquired a SDI, which is over 100 years old content localization company based in LA, which used to be number one in the world. And has become a truly global number one player throughout this consolidation play, and with the help of capital from SoftBank and this AI strategy that we've been advising. And a few months ago, I brought the CEO to Vision Fund, and our chairman Masa was very happy to invest in the company. So Vision Fund ended up investing in this global leading content localization B2B company that was started up in Singapore, and we still categorize it as so the deal was done by the SoftBank Vision Fund Southeast Asia team.
That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Let me cover that story later. For my work.
Okay.
Akshay, I have a question. So there are actually parallel developments of those B2B digitalization and industry modernization startups in India and Southeast Asia, I see. So what do you think? Are they going to compete each other in expanding globally, or are they going to consolidate?
I think it depends. Let me put it that way, right? I think for companies which we've seen which are going after within the B2B side, like large enterprises, we've actually seen a lot of cross-pollination happening across India and Southeast Asia. And so, for example, we've got a company called YellowMessenger.ai, which builds conversational AI bots for enterprises, right? And which started in India and got a lot of early traction there, given that India's like many markets in Southeast Asia, a chat-based economy, right? WhatsApp is kind of the key communication channel, and so they basically help enterprises tackle that. And so, interestingly enough, the first international market they then decided to go to was actually Singapore and Malaysia, and then eventually Indonesia, because what they found was that the end consumer behavior and the end characteristics of even the enterprises themselves are a lot more familiar than sort of the traditional route which companies would look at, maybe going to the US, right? Which is, I mean, US is also chat-based, but very different, right? So I think given some of these structural similarities between markets, I do see this movement of a lot of companies across India and Southeast Asia happening a lot more, right? Similarly, we've got another company called Darwinbox, which is like a HR management SaaS company, right? Focused around mid-sized businesses. Again, they got to a certain scale in India, and similarly for the same route, going to Singapore and some of the other markets in Southeast Asia. So I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that happen increasingly in both directions, right? In terms of consolidation, I'd say I think we'll start seeing that, right, in the next a few years, because as some of the localized players get large enough and sort of they raise enough funding, I think they'll start connecting the dots and sort of and we'll see more consolidation happening as well. So I'd say for large and medium-sized B2B digitization, I see that. I think for small or SMB type of, for example, the procurement use cases for small businesses and some of those kind of use cases, I think there I expect to see more localized players, because they're just the markets are a lot deeper, and I think the nuances of these small businesses is just very, very different, and so I think that would be an example of where you'll probably see more local players in the beginning.
Okay, great. Well, we have only 10 minutes left already. So I'd like to move on to the next question. I'm wondering, in the e-commerce space, in Southeast Asia, Amazon is almost non-existent, right? I mean, well, Singapore is probably the exception, but they're not there, frankly speaking. Do you think there will be a day when you see Amazon invading all those Southeast Asian markets and crushing those local players, or are those Southeast Asian e-commerce markets are taken by local players like SEA, or someone else, GoTo, for example? What do you think? Akshay first, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I'd say I think till now it's been interesting. Like Southeast Asia as a region has been largely, I'd say, ignored by some of the global tech giants, right? Relatively in terms of the amount of resources they put. And so I think for a lot of time, a lot of these guys are focused more on some of the immediate larger, in their view, larger opportunities, right? Like India or like Latam, right? And so my sense is I think they've broadly, I'd say, a little bit missed the boat on from at least on the commerce side in Southeast Asia. You've got multiple large incumbents. If you pick like a market like Indonesia, right? It's like a 3-4 player market just on the commerce side. And so and then you've obviously got one player like Sea, which has got a cash cow business to sort of perpetually invest in the region, right? And which is even going abroad to other markets like Latam now. So I would say it would be tough at this point for a global company to come in and start from scratch at this point. But never say never, because I think we saw in India early days, Flipkart and Snapdeal, and there were some of these local dominant players, right, which got to like $4 or $5 billion of GMV, and at that point, that's when sort of Amazon entered and is sort of I think caught up, right, in a span of like 5-6 years. So you never say never, but I would say it would be an uphill battle, like much more than in some of the other markets they would have faced. Finally, I would just add, I think given that Southeast Asia is obviously not one country, it's multiple markets, right? And so at least what I've seen is that I think the approach for some of these global players has been, for each individual, like some of these smaller markets, they tend to be a little bit more acquisitive, right? Versus trying to set operations up. And we saw that even in the UAE, where with Souk and some of these kinds of Amazon acquiring a local player there. So I feel like that's probably a path which you'll see companies take rather than starting up organically.
Okay.
What do you think, JP?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with Akshay's opinion on this, right? I mean, I just like to echo what Akshay said. Guys like Amazon, Google, these big tech giants have the capital, resources, and tech capabilities to still make an entry into any global region, including Southeast Asia. However, we also think they're latecomers to Southeast Asia, where many local startups have succeeded in establishing a strong foothold and competitive moat, particularly in key sectors such as, just like what Akshay mentioned, e-commerce and fintech, right? So I believe that, Amazon, Google, or, these guys are more likely to be strategic partners to, big tech unicorns rather than, direct competitors. And for example, Facebook and Google made strategic investment into Gojek, and Microsoft, is strategically in a relationship with Grab. So that's the type of, I think, partnership that we'll be seeing more and more. That's what I believe.
Okay, I see. And another question is related to what JP earlier said. Is this strategy in B2C space, user-based first and monetization later strategy, I would say. Will it actually work? I mean, especially in the space of ride-hailing and delivery services. I don't see anyone is actually establishing convincing monetization business model around the world. Very hard to make. it's manage labors. Uh, you know, and if you want high profit, exploit laborers, right? So it's socially becoming very difficult to make a lot of profitability on these two fields of business.
You know, with a different market share, different technology, you know, behind the scene. But you know, if you ask me personally, I do believe, you know, these companies will be able to hit profitability at a certain point. I mean, you know, there is consolidation happening. You know, for example, Gojek and Tokopedia, which were one of the early investors, you know, recently merged. And you know, these changes, you know, such as, you know, this type of merger and acquisition consolidation will you know, make these competition less fierce, which will, you know, lead to a cost reduction that was going into these massive, you know, marketing battle, you know, which will eventually lead to you know, help company to hit the profitability. So I think we're still on the journey, and as an investor, I have a strong belief that, you know, once it hits a certain scale, or become you know, a dominant market player, it won't be a big difficulty to turn around. That's what I think.
So I have an impression that the merger between Tokopedia and Gojek indicates that their business models are like becoming you know, subsidizing or no, making those ride hailers or delivery boys, whatever, to function as a kind of delivery platform for whatever upper layer services they want to provide to consumers. And so these kind of horizontal consolidation makes a dramatic change in their business model. Is that the right understanding?
I think directional wise, you know, that's how we're seeing it as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What do you think, Akshay? Is that going to happen in India as well, for example? Kind of horizontal, you know, consolidation, and it becomes kind of internet conglomerate rather than just, you know, delivery business per se.
Yeah,
is that the direction?
Yeah, I'd say India has taken a slightly different path, right? Because you know, given how large the market is, if you pick like any vertical, right? I mean, there's the potential in the long term to build, you know, tens of billions of dollars of enterprise value and maybe more, right, over time as the consumer also develops and the economy develops, right? And so I think the approach, the way that most investors also view this in India is that you know, I think there will be like large incumbents in every vertical, right? And that's what we're seeing, right? We have food delivery specialists, you know, Swiggy and Zomato, right? We've got you know, we've got commerce players like Flipkart and Amazon, right? We've got and so they're fairly you know, they're fairly like large companies in on their own, and so it's versus like if I compare to a market like Indonesia, where it's slightly, you know, obviously smaller economy overall, even in terms of like population and overall. So I think for a lot of these companies to grow, they have to start thinking about consolidation a lot earlier. That being said, I mean, I think long term, as some of these companies, if one or two companies start turning on the monetization tap, you know, in a very aggressive way and are able to achieve that, I think at that point we might see more consolidation in India, right? Because I think then some of these companies have the appetite to actually be acquisitive, and very similar to, I guess, what we saw with certain companies like, you know, Tencent or Alibaba in China, right? Early days. But I'd say like there's still some time for that, right? Overall.
Okay. Well, it's time to wrap up. Actually, I ask each of you to wrap up by your prediction about Southeast Asia startup market. Do you think it's going to be a long-term boom, or is it going to be short-lived? And based on that prediction, are you expanding your hiring process at your firm regarding Southeast Asia? Start with JP.
Okay, so we see first-time users across emerging Southeast Asia adopt the use of e-commerce, food delivery, telemedicine, digital wallets. Ironically, because of the lockdown, the COVID has been restricting people's daily lives, all over the world. But I'm seeing a lot of changes that are triggered by this lockdown restriction. We have witnessed offline SMEs, and particularly micro SMEs, needing to set up digital storefront to reach consumers during period of lockdown. We have witnessed changing consumer behaviors. For example, increased willingness for both consumer and SMEs try new things, have significantly increased. Take Indonesia, there has been a 60% increase in number of retail investors in 2020 due to COVID, and increased risk appetite to try investing. So I'm very bullish about the future of Southeast Asia. And again, ironically, this unfortunate COVID-19 has, I would say, accelerated these changes in people's willingness to adopt a new technology and a new services. So I would wrap it up that way.
Okay, great. Thank you, JP. And Akshay?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in addition to what JP mentioned around a lot of the COVID dynamics and consumer behavior shift, I'd say the other aspect, which I think is very interesting, is, as a lot of these large companies or scale companies start having liquidity events, we'll see a lot of talent come out of those companies, right? So whether it's like Grab or some of these consolidations with Tokopedia and Gojek, right? And so I think for a long time, the biggest question was like, hey, the opportunity is there. Where's the founder talent? I think that question or that element has accelerated dramatically. And so I'm very excited about the coming years in Southeast Asia.
Okay, great. Thank you, Akshay. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session about Southeast Asia. And virtually, we'd like to give a big round of applause to our distinguished panelists, JP and Akshay. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, audience. Bye-bye.
Ken, thank you, Akshay.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
Bye.